So we had to go for a bond issue. And to get a bond issue approved, you have to get signatures. And there's always opposition.
Yup.
And the people who were carrying up petitions against it were getting more signatures than we had.
Yeah.
And once we had done, we can't go back and get more signatures.
Nope.
Whereas they can go as long as they want to.
You heard that there. That's former South Bend Mayor Roger Parent as he shares some of the drama and the obstacles behind the building of the East Race Waterway. More of that later, but first, welcome to Round the Bend Now and Then, a podcast that shines a light on the South Bend and Mishawaka areas past and present. Through interviews with local business owners, leaders, and community members, our listeners and I learn together about all of the great people and great things going on in our community, as we also learn about South Bend and Mishawaka's history and how intertwined our past is with our present. To many of us who grew up in the South Bend, Mishawaka area, the East Race Waterway near the east bank of the St. Joe River in South Bend has just always been there. And many of us know no different. We've barreled down the raceway in a raft. We enjoy peaceful strolls or even strenuous jogs up and down the sidewalks near the East Race. We go to craft shows or concerts at Sites Park and then eat at one of the food places nearby. Some of you may even live in one of the many condos or apartment buildings close. All of this action is there because of the East Race Waterway. And like I said, for many of us, it's always just been there. In this episode, you'll learn that the East Race has been there a very long time, like 1843 long time. But then, in the 1950s, it was filled in, and it wasn't there until the East Race that we now know was built in the early 1980s. And at that time, there was quite an amount of community drama for and against the building of a whitewater kayak course flowing through a downtown area. Former South Bend Mayor Roger Parent, who was the mayor at the time the East Race Waterway was built, joins me on today's episode and shares his memories of what it was like to collaboratively accomplish building something that literally was the first in North America. He also wrote several chapters about the East Race in his wonderful book that I highly recommend, Getting Things Done, Stories of Leadership from South Bend Mayor's Office to the School Board, the Peace Corps, and beyond. To purchase the book, I put the link to Roger's website in the show notes, and you can also purchase it on Amazon. The East Race Waterway that we know will be turning 40 years old next year. But originally, the East Race was built 180 years ago. A little background. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, obviously there were no power plants and electrical grids to power industry in towns. So they needed to find ways to produce power, and water, hydropower, was one of the few options. By 1842, settlers in the South Bend area had been here for about 10 years or so, and as the town grew, they wanted to take advantage of the river to use its hydropower so that mills and industry could produce goods using that power. So, in 1842, they built a dam. And that is the dam that we see just north of the Jefferson Boulevard Bridge now, near the Century Center. From there, they built a West Race and an East Race, just north of the dam. The West Race I mentioned is that canal of water that flows next to the Century Center and then through those concrete foundation pillars that are still there. That at one time was the Oliver Power Plant. Now, I'm no engineer, but in simple terms, that dam that they built is holding back quite an amount of water pressure. And then you have those two separate, much thinner races, or in other words, man-made canals, built on either side of the dam. When the race's gates are open, water rushes through. The factories that were built on the east and west races used that fast-flowing water as it flowed through the turbines to produce power. By the 1900s, the East Race was used less and less for power, as coal and other sources were used. And by the late 1940s, the East Race was a public health concern. I'll read some excerpts from a 1946 South Bend Tribune Voice of the People written by T. Howard, titled, East Race Fill-In Suggested. A post-war improvement that should be demanded by the Board of Health is eliminating and filling in that stagnant old East Race. And then the author goes on to provide some history of the East Race, and then he ends it with this. Having this polluted canal at the expense of the public's health should be the chief concern of the Public Board of Health. So, by this time, it seemed that the old East Race was a hazard. Also in my research, sadly, one of these articles was quite sad. I read that several young boys drowned in the East Race over the years, and also several cars literally drove past the Washington Street dead end there, right into the river. Eventually, the decision was made to fill it in. So, over the next several years, the city worked to do just that. I found several articles as late as 1967 where dirt from projects like the County City building were brought to the East Race site. From there, in 1973, a master plan study was done that stressed river corridor development throughout the city, and it included opening the old East Race as it would enhance the value and quality of future development along its shore and provide an interesting and unique feature for the public to enjoy. I tell you what, that study seemed to get it right. From that time in 1973 until 1980, when Roger Parent became mayor, the opening of the old East Race was mentioned a few times and was kept in the forefront by, what I could tell, a very passionate and absolutely persuasive group of people called the Michiana Watershed. It is that group that I think we should also thank, because by the late 1970s, that group had pushed consistently to get the ball rolling and build the only man-made whitewater kayak course in North America. Next, former South Bend Mayor Roger Parent talks about the time leading up to him becoming mayor and the Michiana Watershed's push for a whitewater kayak course.
The people, the Michiana Watershed group, they were the people that did a study about the East Race, what to do with it, and came up with the idea of a whitewater kayak course.
Yeah.
And they'd been talking about that for a number of years before I was a city councilman.
Right.
But they talked to people, and I remember that former Mayor Pete Nemeth, who's mayor, I was on the city council then, he liked the idea, but then he didn't run for a second term. Then I was approached.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people, it wasn't my idea. You know, if you listen to people, and they come up with some great ideas. And so it was a real challenging area. We were getting no significant tax revenues from that place. It looked bad.
Yeah.
And so I went along with the idea.
Yeah.
And here it is today, but it was a challenge to get it done.
Now, I'm sure that the very last thing on a brand new mayor's mind, taking over a city that was going through decades-long transition, was digging up an old industrial mill race to build a whitewater kayak course. But, as you'll hear, Mayor Parent was open to any and all ideas. And I'm telling you, this Michiana Watershed group could have sold ice to Eskimos because they were convincing. And they had the new mayor sold. Speaking about that group, that Michiana Watershed, in your book you wrote that in the 1970s, like you had just mentioned, there were studies done and river studies talking about reopening the East Race, and then they kind of fizzled out a little bit at the end of Miller's term, and then you started, but you had to. That was probably the last thing on your mind as starting as a brand new mayor in South Bend, Indiana. You had to get your administration going. You had to get all of that ready. But you met with that group. They asked to meet with you, didn't they?
They asked to meet with me. And
what were your thoughts going into it? Were you just giving them little time, or you were just...
I I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I was open to almost anything. One of the things I did when I first became mayor is there were all kinds of physical models of plans for South Bend. And I took that and I put them all away. And the reason I did was people would look at that and say, well, they're not interested in what I want to do. Doesn't fit in. So I'd done that. So I was open to all kinds of ideas. And so they came up, they convinced me that it was a good idea for a lot of reasons.
Right.
One of which is it doubles the amount of waterfront in that area of South Bend.
Okay.
So that really opens it up for something. And the park department became interested, of course. They had to. It's going to be a park.
Yeah. So he was convinced, and he was going to lead this city in rebuilding the old East Race. But as you'll hear next, and as you can read in his book, the only way that Indiana cities could obtain money to borrow at that time was, as he wrote, a convoluted and long process. Then, a city had to get permission from the public to approve a bond, and to get that permission, they had to secure more signatures than the opposition. More nerve-wracking, once the city had filed its signatures, the opposition had additional time to get more signatures. As you'll hear next, and from what I read in the newspapers at the time, it's those signatures that almost derailed the project before it even started.
The main problem is funding. If people think the city doesn't have enough money today, they should have been mayor or councilman in those days.
Wow.
We were really hamstrung for money. We had no money.
Yes.
So we had to go for a bond issue. And to get a bond issue approved, you have to get signatures. And there's always opposition.
Yep.
And the people who were carrying up petitions against it were getting more signatures than we had.
Yeah.
And once we had done, we can't go back and get more signatures.
Nope.
Whereas they can go as long as they want to. Thank God the former city attorney Richard Hill and I think John Hunt, who was head of economic development, met with a group of people who were carrying a petition who were against it.
Yeah.
Somehow or other, they convinced them
to
not file them. If that had not happened, we might not have that today.
We may not have that today. And so what you're talking about is literally, in order to get a bond issue to pay for public improvements, and at the same time, you were working on another bond issue in the city.
That's right.
The book said. And so you had to, and it boiled down to getting signatures.
That's right. We had another bond issue. It's called a general bond issue. The other one was a park bond issue for the East Race. We needed to buy equipment.
Yeah.
Fire trucks, police cars, and that was eligible. And so most mayors will not decide, or city council members, to have two bond issues going out for signatures at the same time. And it was very, very difficult. But on the other hand, we worked hard in those days to get bipartisan support.
Correct.
That project, for example, needed a lot of state support. That was all Republican at the time. We had a Republican governor. And so in order to get things done, in order to get that thing done, we had to work with state officials, federal officials, because money was going to come from a lot of different places, as well as local people.
We just heard about folks who were in opposition to the building of a kayak course. But there was also a lot of support as well, and especially from the business community, as they saw prime pieces of real estate with tons of potential for growth. Next, we talk about just how right they were. Hey, I found an article from August, and we mentioned gathering public support. And when you read the old newspaper articles, there are all types of articles for and against, just like in any type of public support there. But the business community, from what I could tell, the business community was very excited about it. And even the president of First Source, Chris Murphy at the time, he says that, quote, "I don't think there's any doubt that the opening of the East Race would encourage development. I think it's essential." So I'm sure quotes like that was helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. And but the East Race is, in my opinion, the most immediately successful redevelopment project the city's ever done.
Really? So you guys knew right away?
Right away. I mean, it was done. Apartments, an apartment project came. AM General decided to place their office building there, and people loved it. They crowded it. We had kayakers from all over the world come here.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was one of my questions, was how soon after opening did you know? Because even in June of 1984, I mean, right when you opened, there were advertisements in the newspaper from banks. Like literally, national banks said, we have $5 million to lend to help the East Race meet its full potential.
Yeah.
Already, you guys had that much support right away.
Oh, yeah. It was, if you looked at it before, and of course, people complain about spending public funds for these kinds of entities because it's a park entity. I would say that 3 or 4 years later, that money that we spent on it was all made up in extra taxes.
Unreal.
And that's continued to this day.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if a city like ours, and I never saw South Bend as a Rust Belt city by any means, but if a city like ours going through a big transition from a certain type of economy to another type, if you don't spend money, if you don't have exciting projects, who's going to want to live here?
It'll fizzle out.
And who's going to want to come here to build a business?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we were doing.
Truth there. You have to have projects like this to spark growth and quality of life. But to get to that growth and to get to that quality of life and to successfully pull off a unique project like this, nothing is easy. You mentioned that the giant piece of cement. Now, when you guys first started, you were ready to break ground. Like any big project, you wrote about all the issues that can happen. Like you had to purchase properties and figure out who owned what. There was more toxic material that you had to remove. But then you mentioned in 1984, after it was built, you guys were testing the water, or the engineers were testing the water, and giant concrete slabs were thrown into the air. Oh my, were you there for that, or was that something they told you about? I would have puked.
I wasn't there for that, but it's something I was told about. And maybe James Seitz, now deceased, he was worried about it, and so were the engineers. But they studied old pictures of the flumes, that used to be a place where water wheels and water was directed to power different factories along there. And they figured out what it was very quickly. And I was pretty happy about that.
I mean, imagine all that work going into it and all the planning, and then and the first time you turn the water on, it flies up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the problem was that when it was built, if you had water on it, it was stable. It's when they emptied it, the pressure was off, the pressure underneath pushed it up.
I see.
I learned a little bit about engineering and so forth.
Oh God, it's so touch and go with big projects like that, One of the things that I like about studying our local history are reading about some of the plans at the time that never came to fruition. Next, we talk about a plan that could have made the East Race a bit more like Italy. Speaking of being a mayor and being in a position, there are so many plans. Like you had mentioned when you first got elected, there were all these models that you just threw to the side and so many plans. I always chuckle when I read plans that never came to fruition, right? And some of the harebrained ideas. But at this time, this was in 1978, okay? So you'd mentioned Jerry Miller, the Michiana watershed studies. They were getting the ball rolling at some point in 78. And there was a newspaper article, and it says, the headline was, "Ride a Gondola to Sunny Italy." And it said, quote, "Don't be surprised in the very near future to see downtown East Bank of the St. Joseph River transformed into Venice with gondolas paddling down a canal to sunny Italy Cafe." It just tickles me that all these different plans that are thrown your way. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of, it's wild. How, as a city leader, do you know which ones to pursue, you know?
Well, you're not always sure.
Right.
And I could tell you an example of something that was pursued that didn't work that I was a part of.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember the pedestrian area downtown,
the River Bend Plaza downtown.
River Bend Plaza, whatever it was called. Yeah. I was on the city council then and voted for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then when I became mayor, I'm the guy that tore it up. So some things don't work. You got to take some risks. You know, how many businesses succeed all the time?
Correct.
They don't. Except that it's their own money. They go out of business or whatever.
Right.
Cities. So no, it's a gut call. It's a gut decision.
True.
Very often.
Yeah.
You listen to the people around you. You ask for the best advice, and then that's the main job. You know what else Father Ted said about management? Mm-hmm. He said, "I only made the tough decisions because all the other ones were made by people before me in the administration."
Yeah.
In a way, that's what mayors do. There's a lot of people making a lot of decisions who work for you, and they advise you, they do all that. Mm-hmm. They come to you, people will come to me and say, "Well, what are you going to do?" You have to decide.
Yeah.
And politically, you're the one at risk politically, but you're not at risk other ways.
Right.
My view is you have to hold any job you have and be willing to leave it if people don't work well with you, if you don't work well with them, if things go wrong, whatever the case may be. So you don't let the job define who you are.
Yeah, that would be wild, floating down the East Race in a gondola. Next, you'll hear that I tried something different. I set up a table with 2 chairs, 2 microphones, and the recorder at the East Race. I thought that it would be neat to talk to random people out enjoying themselves at the East Race, and I thought that it would be a more authentic way to tell how impactful a little whitewater kayak course could be for a community. So this past Thursday evening, July 13th, I was out there for a little bit testing the waters. No pun intended. And then earlier today, I was out there, Saturday, July 15th, spent some time out there when the course was open to all the rafters and the kayakers. And this was my first time doing something like this, so I truly didn't know what to expect. But it was real fun, and most people were willing to talk. Not all really wanted to record, but several did. And as you'll hear, when you ask random people their thoughts about something like the East Race, you can truly get a sense of how important a community asset like this is. All of its warts and all. Next, you'll hear from 2 young ladies who are walking down the East Race Thursday evening wearing bright yellow Youth Service Bureau t-shirts. And you know me, I'm always going to try to lift up any local organization doing good things. So I called them over, introduced myself, and asked them if they wanted a chance to plug the Youth Service Bureau. And they said that the East Race is a spot that they'll frequently see kids out and about, and they'll provide them information about the Youth Service Bureau. So I'm literally standing out here with a table on the East Race, asking people up and down here how they feel about the East Race and everything for our future episode. And I run into Reagan and Claire, who are wearing yellow Youth Service Bureau Street Outreach shirts. So I stopped and just asked them what they're doing. I always want to lift up our community. So Reagan, what are you guys doing out here?
So today we are working with a program in a Youth Service Bureau called Street Outreach. There's a whole bunch of programs for Youth Service Bureau, but today we're doing the Street Outreach program. So we go out into the community. We just try and find kids where they're at. We go to a lot of parks, spend a lot of time outside just talking to people, spreading the word about the program. We help kids with a whole bunch of stuff, kind of anything that they need. We've got a facility that it's called the Drop-In Center that kids can go to. We've got free pizza. We've got video games. Kind of just a place to hang out. We've also got like a washer and dryer there. We've got a ton of places, and then we can meet them and kind of figure out what their needs are and go from there. And so today, while we're out here, we're just spreading the word about what we can help them with. We help kids find jobs. We help them apply for, food stamps or get case management, anything kind of like that, anything that they need.
Just helping them navigate society.
Yeah.
Because often they're probably kiddos who may not have as much guidance at home, and they need you guys to help direct them.
Yeah. And so we just love to kind of make it casual, find a good place. We like to meet them where they're at.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's really cool. I've been here for a little bit over 2 years now. Okay. I really like it. I'm also involved with another one of the programs that they have called Safe Station.
Okay. Yes.
And that's a different program. It's a shelter. But it's been really cool working with them for sure.
That's neat. You've been in the city for 2 years or with Youth Service Bureau for 2 years?
Both actually. I'm from the Chicago area after college. Well, COVID brought me here. And so I've been here since shortly after. I lived here about a month before I started working for Youth Service Bureau.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the Youth Service Bureau, are you guys building a new building on McKinley?
Yes, we are.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's going to be awesome. All of our programs are going to be in one spot. Right now we're kind of spread out throughout South Bend. The drop-in center is over on Lincoln Way.
Okay.
But it's going to be really cool putting everything together. It's going to connect a lot of the programs. I think it's going to make things a lot better.
That's cool.
And we're getting a gym there, and we actually just had a staff meeting today where we got a little bit of an update about the building. We decided on the chairs and stuff. So,
that is neat. That's the little details there where it's coming together, right?
Yeah.
All right. That's awesome. Is there anything else you want to say at all, or?
No, I think that's it. Awesome.
All right. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
And you're my first ever random guest.
Really?
Claire and Reagan.
I'm happy to be here.
Everybody else has been scheduled and everything. This is just random. Thank you.
Woohoo.
Next, you'll hear from Stephen Brown, who I think he said he's from Battle Creek, Michigan. And if I'm mistaken, Stephen, I definitely apologize. He came down with a crew of his buddies to go kayaking. All right. Well, hey, sir, thank you for joining us. Could I get your name?
Stephen Brown.
Stephen Brown. Stephen, thanks for joining us. I ran into Stephen here at the East Race. Why did you come down here?
I've been a member. I got into kayaking basically when I was 19 years old. And I've been coming here for the last 20 years. I've been doing the whitewater kayaking, freestyle kayaking for every bit of those 20 years. Got lots of opportunity. South Bend, East Race. This place opened a lot of opportunity for me to travel all over the country and different parts of the world and kayak and see different things and different people and culture and food and
oh man, so this sparked your interest in the kayak?
This is the beginning.
Really? Yeah. And it's because of the East Race here, then you've kind of branched out.
Yep. So just branched out. You meet people, make friends, raft guides, basically. There's a place up north in northern Michigan, up in Iron Mountain, True North Outpost, and I got a friend up there, and he runs a rafting company, and people come from all over the tri-state area. And he also started off. He kayaked here a lot. So I met him, and it just branches and branches from there.
Dude, that's amazing. Look at that. Here's a guy who started kayaking at the East Race 20 years ago, and from there, the sport has been a part of his life. Next, I talked to a young man named Jonah, who's probably about 10 or 11-ish years old. Jonah, I apologize if I'm not spot on there. He was with some of his buddies and his father, and they had just gone down the East Race in a raft. Not on camera.
No.
I have a face for radio. Just hold it just about like that, big man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your name?
Jonah.
So Jonah, you just went down the East Race?
Yes.
Were you a little bit nervous?
No?
You've done it before?
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite thing about going down the East Race, Jonah?
The bumps.
The bumps? Have you ever been thrown out of the raft?
No.
No. You're just too skilled at rafting down the East Race, right?
Well, I fell out 2 times.
You fell out 2 times, so what happens?
I fell back 2 times.
You fell backwards? So what do you have to do?
I climbed up. Well, he picked me up.
So you needed some help, right? That's all right. All right, Jonah. Well, hey, thank you for joining me. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, guys. All right. Next, I run into a young guy about in his young 20s named Michael, who was out walking his dog. I found somebody else here walking his dog up and down the East Race. Your dog's a good-looking pup. What kind of dog is it?
She's a Rottweiler Mastiff mix.
A Rottweiler Mastiff mix. All right. And your name's Michael, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How often do you come out to the East Race and walk your dog?
Oh, maybe once every couple months. But
once every couple months? Are you from out of town or something? Or?
Yeah, I visit every so often. But...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. And so the East Race is a place that you come to when you come here.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the more pretty places in town, especially to walk your dog. Okay. Nice atmosphere.
Nice. Do you ever run into any characters walking up and down the East Race?
No, I can't recall a time I have, except for this one here that I'm interviewing with at the moment.
That's funny. Have you ever been to East Race Liquors?
No, I haven't. I was a little bit too young when they were still around.
Okay.
But I heard that I might be able to get away with no ID. Is there some stories about that?
Oh, I can't tell.
No.
All right. Well, hey, Michael, you can get on your way, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, bye. Right there were 4 different groups of people there for different reasons, whether it's walking your dog, kayaking, rafting, or like Reagan and Claire with the Youth Service Bureau, trying to help out the community. And the East Race is at the center of it. Next, I was able to track down a gal who was hustling the whole time, working at the East Race for the venues, parks, and arts. All right, so Kelly is gracious enough to join me here. And Kelly, you want to describe your role with the venues, parks, and arts?
So I am the aquatics and ice manager, so I oversee everything water related. Our learn to swim programs, our lifeguarding classes, our pools, the fabulous East Race, and then the ice trail at Howard Park in the wintertime. So
how cool. And so just like I explained, I had we have a podcast episode coming out tomorrow on the East Race, and I'm literally here just trying to talk to the variety of people who enjoy it here. And
there are so many people that come out. We've had weekends where we've had family reunions come in. So they've had people from, across the country that have, come in. We've had Notre Dame brought their pre-college program a couple times. So we had international students come in. And then one cool thing I don't think maybe a lot of people know, or maybe they've seen and didn't know what was going on, is our local fire department will train their swiftwater rescue team here.
Yes.
They also bring in their international school and will train here. So we had teams from, I believe, Australia and New Zealand earlier this year. Along with Indianapolis Fire Department, Chicago, New York, anybody that's got a large body of river running through their city will come here and train.
That is cool.
It's a pretty neat experience to, see everyone come down and just have a great time. You don't have to really know what you're doing.
Nope. Just head on down.
Be able to go down to East Race.
You guys are here to help.
Yeah, we're here to help. We've got a ton of lifeguards that are on duty all the time. And a lot of people don't realize it's only 3 to 5 feet deep throughout the entire course.
Exactly.
Like, it's not like you're 20 feet deep and don't know what's below you.
No, it's not.
Most people can put their feet down and hop right back in their boat. So,
exactly.
And especially on days like today. Today is absolutely gorgeous.
Perfect.
Sunny, cool breeze. Like, you can't beat being down here.
Nope, absolutely not. Do you ever run into any characters up and down here at all?
All the time. All the time.
But we keep coming back, right? There's nothing wrong.
Yeah. You get to know people. I saw a couple earlier today that they were here a couple weekends ago. And I was like, you guys are back for more? And they're like, that's not good that you recognize us. I'm like, no, but it's like, you're coming back. You're enjoying it. It's not just a one-time thrill.
Yes.
We have kayakers that are here every single weekend with us.
Beautiful.
From open season to end of season.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kel, I appreciate your time. That was awesome. You rocked it. Thank you.
Awesome.
High five. All right. You have to love that passion out of Kelly. Venues, parks, and arts, you have a good one there. I hope our listeners enjoyed that little segment. And again, I hope that it provides some authentic thoughts from members of our community. For the next few minutes, we wrap up by going back to my conversation with Mayor Parent. And I asked him what would have happened if he didn't take the advice of Father Ted Hesburgh's quote. And his response was true of anyone who wants to make his or her city a better place to live. You wrote in your book about Father Ted Hesburgh and that quote, and that has stuck with me since I read the quote. If you're damned if you do or damned if you don't, then do. Man, what if you would have went against his advice and just didn't pursue that,
Well, I would say you don't belong being mayor of a city.
Good point. Good point.
Because you're always between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
You always are. There's it's just not that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are always, it's a democracy. People always complain about this or that or whatever.
Right.
And if politicians don't have the courage to not listen to that all the time and move forward, then nothing gets done.
Yeah. And God, and that area now is just gorgeous, you know?
Yeah.
It's just gorgeous. We wrap it up next with some reflective thoughts 40 years later about the gem that is the East Race. Speaking of courage, and speaking of that, at the groundbreaking ceremony in 1982, you said years from now, people will ask how we pulled this one off. Most of all, we pulled this off because of the many leaders in South Bend. Leadership means taking risks, it means courage, and working hard.
I said that.
You said that in 82, so
a long time ago.
41 years ago. It rings true today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just takes courage and everything. And imagine if you would have listened to all those dang naysayers at the time. The legacy of the East Race. What are your thoughts about it today?
Well, even at the time that it was being constructed, people who came to South Bend to consider jobs in South Bend were brought out to the East Race under construction by the potential employers to encourage them to move here, telling them this is a city on the move. This is a city that's moving forward. And so it's served that way forever. Plus, it's a great park facility. And my daughter and her family, who don't live here, came here last week, and they went down to East Race. They always do that. And so it's something that's so unusual and different that it tells people who come here, this is great. Plus, people forget that the river itself is a major attraction. There was a businessman came here during my tenure as mayor. We were up in one of what used to be the First Coast Bank on the top floor. And the Century Center by then was completed. And he said there are very few places in the world where you have this kind of a beautiful river and construction around it.
Right there.
And so
right there.
And so it's been that. It's part of what makes South Bend a great place to work and live.
Yeah. And it was a partnership between the city leaders and private partnerships and beautifying the river and making it better, because when industry used the river back in the turn of the century, and it wasn't a beautiful thing, was it?
No, it
was used for power then. We don't need it for power anymore.
That's right. But that's part of the transition we've been going through. It's taken 50 or 60 years to get to the point where we were then.
Yeah.
To where we are now, when people come to South Bend and think it's a pretty nice place to be. Taking that long.
I thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. Thank you, Roger Parent, for your time. I am so appreciative that you are sharing your memories and knowledge with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Folks, go out and get his book. Again, the website is in the show notes. And I'm also real excited that in the very near future, we have an upcoming episode on the building of Kovaleski Stadium, now Four Winds Field. Be on the lookout for that soon. I also want to thank Claire, Reagan, Stephen, Jonah, Michael, and Kelly for your bravery in talking with some dude with a microphone at the East Race. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. As always, follow all of our social media, Twitter, @RoundTheBendPod, Facebook, Round the Bend Now and Then, YouTube, @RoundTheBend574. Check it out. Videos of some of the places that we discuss in the episodes, including the East Race. Join me again next time as we learn more about South Bend and Mishawaka's Now and Then.